depending upon different circumstances. In the yoga system, the mind and the conditioned soul, that's us, are especially important. Since the mind is the central point of yoga practice, Atma refers here to the mind. The purpose of the yoga system is to control the mind and to draw it away from attachment to sense objects. It is stressed herein that the mind must be so trained that it can deliver the conditioned soul from the mire of nescience or ignorance. In material existence, one is subjected to the influence of the mind and the senses. In fact, the pure soul is entangled in the material world because the mind is involved with the false ego, which desires to lord it over material nature. Therefore, the mind should be trained so that it will not be attracted by the glitter of material nature, and in this way, the conditioned soul may be saved. One should not degrade oneself by attraction to sense objects. The more one is attracted by sense objects, the more one becomes entangled in material existence. The best way to disentangle oneself is to always engage the mind in Krishna consciousness. The word he is used, H-I, is used for emphasizing this point. That is, one must do this. It is also said, for man, mind is the cause of bondage, and mind is the cause of liberation. Mind absorbed in sense objects is the cause of bondage, and mind detached from the sense objects is the cause of liberation. Therefore, the mind which is always engaged in Krishna consciousness is the cause of supreme liberation. I was thinking about, it was kind of like an aha moment I had recently. And have you ever lived with a roommate that was very incompatible or even antagonistic towards you?
Yes.
A lot of anxiety there. So if our mind is not a friend, we're living, who could be closer to you than your own mind? We're constantly having dialogue with our own mind. And there are many prayers. There's one great saint named Raghunath Das Goswami who composed a book called the Mana Shiksha, Instructions to the Mind. And he addresses the mind as if it was like a person. He says, my dear mind, and he's my dear brother mind. So I had this bit of realization that, we can, what's the word? It can be a game changer if we can change the relationship we have with our own mind. And one time, Srila Prabhupada was making some comment about the opulence that was abound in the Western culture. And they were saying, how is it that, they're engaged in so many materialistic activities and they have all this opulence? And Prabhupada said, what is their opulence? They don't have a moment's peace of mind. If your mind is not peaceful, if the mind is always agitated, you're living with this. It's like having a little kid that's just out of control, and it is always disturbed. Or like a dog, you see people when they're walking their dogs, the dogs are being pulled by their senses, especially their nose. They have such a high or such a strong sense of smell. And if you have a dog, my sister's really into dogs. She does the dog rescue things, she finds homes for rescue dogs and stuff. So if you have a dog that's well trained, they can be a great asset. They have these service dogs, or they have what do they call it, the canine cops, what do they call them? The police cars or whatever, the canine units, like, so they're highly trained. So they're controlled, like they're obedient, like, heel boy, heel, like they'll follow, otherwise dogs can be quite obnoxious. They're all over the place. So if we have a well-trained mind, and that it may sound a little funny, like, because back in the it was in the late 1970s, 1980s, there was this deprogrammers. They were talking about these cults, and they practice mind control. Well, if your mind is out of control, what does that mean? It means you're insane, like you're crazy. Like you can't control yourself. And when the mind is not controlled, then the senses, like the dog just being dragged by their sense of smell. So if you have a vehicle, you're driving your car, and there's one metaphor that describes that the body is like a chariot, and the senses are like 5 horses. You're seeing, hearing, smelling, touching, and tasting. They're like 5 horses, and the reins are like the mind, and the driver is the intelligence, holding it. So if the driver lets go of the reins, then what happens? And the horses go out of control, and you're going to careen all over the place. So if we want to achieve, even on a material level, it requires some discipline. If you want to achieve anything, you become successful in any field, you have to practice some austerity, some restraint, some voluntarily restricting oneself from indulging unnecessarily in some type of sense activity, to be able to focus on your goal. So there's another verse that Krishna describes about the austerities of the mind. And it's interesting, this word austerity in Sanskrit is called tapa. And tapa means heat. And what is heat? It's energy. So when you practice austerity, you get strength, you get energy. Austerity is considered to be one of the 4 pillars of a spiritual life: austerity, cleanliness, mercy, and truthfulness. So austerity of the mind, Krishna says, it consists of satisfaction, simplicity, gravity, self-control, and purification of one's existence. So to have a peaceful mind that you have trained or disciplined, like this, the word discipline doesn't necessarily mean punishment. It means, it actually comes from a Latin word which means instruction. And a disciple, a student, is one who receives instruction from a teacher. So to discipline the mind, to train the mind, so that we can utilize the mind for our benefit. It'll be our friend, it'll be a partner, a cooperator to help us in our progressive spiritual life. So these austerities of the mind, the first one, satisfaction. And we can actually practice becoming satisfied. And it may sound a little funny. How do you practice being satisfied? So, Srila Prabhupada in that commentary said that one should train the mind to be detached from sense gratification. And in Sanskrit, there's a word kama, which means strong material desire. And within the mind, kama, it begins with attachment. And Krishna says in the second chapter, if you contemplate, if you think about the objects of the senses, your mind becomes attached. So that's why, I mean, this is very common knowledge in the psychology of selling, is that they get you now with all these algorithms where, when you go look for something online and then suddenly all these little banner ads are flashing the item that you were looking at or a similar one. If you like this, you may like that, So it's to get your mind constantly thinking about it, because then your mind becomes attached to it. There's a connection that's made. It may be subtle, but there's a connection. And then the more we dwell on that attachment, then you start to develop a very strong desire. I must have this. I really need this. I didn't think I did. And there's an action expression that kind of the essence of capitalism is create a need and then fulfill it. Something you didn't need it, but now I suddenly need it. And that's the whole idea of selling you things that you don't really need is you create this desire in the mind that I need this thing. So we have to protect ourselves or protect our mind, just like you would like with a child. If you were to feed your child caffeinated beverages and lots of candy bars, what would happen?
Drive me crazy.
The kids go nuts. They're already wired, but if you feed them unhealthy food, so you think of the mind as sort of like a child that, what are we going to feed the mind? And we're not just digesting foodstuffs, we're digesting sounds, we're digesting what we look at. The mind is digesting it. So we'd be, just as you'd be very careful about what you fed a child, so we have to be very careful what the mind is digesting through our various senses. So this is part of the training, the discipline of being very conscientious that we are engaging our senses in spiritual activity. Rupa Goswami, a great sage, he actually defines this process of Krishna consciousness, bhakti yoga. He says, Sarvopadi vinirmuktam tat paratrena nirmalam rishikesham sevanam bhakti uchate. He defines that spiritual life, bhakti yoga, he begins by saying it's free from all false designations, upadis. But he says, but it really is, it comes down to engaging the senses in positive spiritual activities. We have just like this beautiful artwork here. You can enjoy the beautiful artwork, We want to see something beautiful, just like we want to eat something. There's a craving, there's a need to digest food. We need that. So the eyes, we need to digest beautiful things. We're hankering for something beautiful to look at, beautiful sunset, beautiful people, beautiful whatever, artwork. So we can dovetail that propensity in a spiritual way. And hearing, just like we had nice kirtan there with music. So there's spiritual sound vibration. It's not, we're not denying engaging the senses, but it's redirecting them in a spiritual direction. And that way the mind is becoming attached, because there's no void to make the mind detached from material sense gratification or material activity. You can't just not be attached. It's a question of what are we attached to. So spiritual life it's directing the senses in a very positive way. It's not like some of the other practices of yoga and meditation require one try to, you could say in an artificial way, detach themselves from material activity in society, they would go off into the forest or caves and practice meditation and so on. It's not really practical for us in this day and age. It's very difficult to do that type of. I think some few people can do it, but it's generally not possible. But in Krishna consciousness, we have a lot of engagement for the senses. We have beautiful deities. You can absorb your mind in looking at the beautiful, and then we have this artwork here. The taste, we have so many delicious foodstuffs that have been purified by being offered to the Lord, so you can enjoy delicious food. There's so many different styles of kirtan, the music. Kirtan means to glorify God. So there's so many different beautiful songs expressed, so we can enjoy that music that we naturally are looking to engage ourselves in. So it's all very positive. It's a very positive process of spiritual life. So going back to that austerity of the mind, satisfaction, because I started talking about where these material desires, kama, Krishna describes that it burns like fire and it's never satisfied. Material desire, you never reach a point of satiation. You always want something more. There's something like if you take some drug, it's like you get some buzz, but then you need to get the same effect. If you continue doing it, you have to take more to get the same effect. And then ultimately you get to a point where it's so detrimental to your health. You just see people who are out of control with drugs. Their whole life goes into chaos. So that we can't really be satisfied if we are dwelling on material sense objects. But we can be satisfied dwelling on spiritual sense objects. But that satisfaction that Krishna is talking about in the Bhagavad Gita, it's talking about material satisfaction, that you should be content with what we have. My sister told me once, the more money you have, the more you need. And there was one multi-millionaire, I don't know if he was a billionaire, it was back in the 60s, he met an unfortunate demise. I don't know his name, I was just hearing the story that a journalist had interviewed him, and they said, if you could kind of sum up in one word, sum up, kind of what you've learned or something about his, the success that he had achieved, and he said, oh, that's easy. I can tell you in one word, more. Greed. That's the result of unfulfilled lust or material desires, that I want more. Or I become angry. It didn't turn out I couldn't get it, or I got it and it didn't turn out to be what I thought it would be, or I got it and I lost it. That's kind of material life in a nutshell, So, but satisfaction, generally less is more. The more we can simplify our life and be satisfied with what we have, and I was just sort of practicing this a little bit. It's funny. Sometimes when people, when cell phones came out, when people were, especially now with the earbud things, people are just walking on the street, that used to be like crazy people used to, rant and talk to themselves, now you're like, people are walking around, talking. So I was sort of not playing a game, but I was sort of, I think I was verbalizing it even. They have like these affirmations, people, when you, the mind is very powerful, even on a material level. If you want to achieve success, there are strategies that many of these, success gurus or self-improvement gurus, they talk about how if you can harness the power of your mind, you can achieve many amazing things. So there's some affirmations, sometimes people, they put little notes up, like, you can do it, or, you, whatever, And I had one little, I put up in the bathroom. It said that, this was actually a line from John Lennon from a song. It says, there are no problems, there are only solutions. If we have that confidence that actually what appears to be a problem is simply a way that we can become like an obstacle, if we reframe, this is training of the mind, you reframe, it's not a problem, it's a step, it's a stepping stone to go higher. Like, I need to climb over this obstacle to get to something higher. That's what the difficulties, like, it's not that there aren't problems, but you're reframing it. It's a challenge to go higher in life. And this word promote, it's very interesting, because the word prapadyate in Sanskrit means surrender. So sometimes surrender, we hear this a lot, especially in bhakti yoga, about surrendering to the Lord, surrendering our lives, and that can be a little daunting, surrender, because surrender has sort of a negative connotation, like, I give up, I surrender, isn't it? Put your hands up, I surrender, put your hands above your head, and walk slowly, surrender. But, we have that idea of surrender in kirtan, you put your hands up, I surrender my heart. But it's a promotion, because let's get a little let's do a little etymology here. In Sanskrit, pada means feet. So you have in English a podiatrist. It comes from the Sanskrit pada. And pra means forward. Just like it translates into English, pro, P-R-O, like a proponent or promote. And mote means motion. So promote, forward motion. So that's what surrender means. Pada means feet. What do feet do? They move. And pra means forward. So surrender means to move forward. It's not a negative. It's a promotion. Motion, pada, feet. You see the connection there? Promote. It's a promotion. To surrender your life to God means you're promoted. You got a better life. You're working for the best employer. Is that when you have a job, if you get a promotion, what does that mean? You rise up in the company, right? You got more benefits. You get a better salary. You got maybe they'll give you a car, and you get a travel expense. It's a promotion. So surrender to God means you become a more trusted person, and you become freer. You're sort of given the keys. Everybody's looking for freedom, right? America, it's all about freedom. So this is real freedom, is to train the mind to be our friend and to be a cooperator in moving forward towards the ultimate destination of developing our pure, loving relationship with God. So I'm going to stop there and see if anybody has any question or reflection. And what I'd like to do is, usually, because I'll never stop talking, even when the food comes out. And I think it kind of stifles, because a lot of times we want to get together and converse with one another. And if we keep talking while people are eating, then we don't get an opportunity to sit and visit with one another. So let's try to do our Q&A or discussion now, and then when they bring the food, we can just go right away to catching up with each other and friendship and so on. So, any thoughts that anybody has? Yes,
I'd like to reflect on what you're saying, how words are. So the word problem, problem, blame, it's almost like blame. So in pro can also be for. So a problem, it can be, for blame. Who are we gonna blame? Where are we gonna blame? Where are we gonna put the problem?
Mm-hmm.
So, what do you think about that?
That's good. Again, it's about reframing.
Our language.
Yeah, words are powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And affirmations, it's a way to train the mind, to reframe even with our language. And it's practice. That's what training or discipline is, practicing. These things don't just come wishful thinking or, it requires, that's, in Sanskrit the word is sadhana, it requires practice. And sadhya means a goal. So sadhana is a practice to achieve a goal. So you need both. You need a destination, and then you need the practice to get to the destination. So the wisdom literatures, the scriptures, they're given it's sort of like a roadmap. Like you have a destination, and then there's a roadmap. How do you get to this destination? So, we establish this goal in spiritual life. Pure love of God is our ultimate goal. But how do you get there? How do you actually practice? And there are intermediary goals. Just like if you're going to drive to New York, first you have to go to wherever, St. Louis, and then from St. Louis you go to wherever, Philadelphia, and then you go, you're on the right path, okay, so there are intermediary goals, and one of these intermediate goals is to become situated in sattva, or goodness. In the mode of goodness, the mind is very peaceful, and we're very content with our material circumstances, and then we're not agitated, the mind's not agitated, so you can go deeply into meditation. We do our chanting, and many types of meditation, but they're, we're focused on mantra meditation, and you can go very deeply into the process of chanting and take it below just the conscious mind. We have the conscious, it's like an iceberg. The conscious mind is only like the tip of the iceberg. An iceberg is mostly underwater. So the conscious mind, we may be chanting very superficially, just on the sort of level of the conscious mind, but our emotions are primarily beneath, the unconscious mind, and we need to penetrate deep. And that requires, our meditation has to be you have to be very mindful. This is a big buzzword these days, mindfulness. To be very present in the moment, and that's sattva. That's this. Rajas or passion means I'm always hankering for something I don't have, and tamas, ignorance, is I'm lamenting for things, missed opportunities or things I've lost. So it's this vacillating from hankering and lamenting and hankering and lamenting. You can't go deep into any type of meditation, but in sattva, in goodness, when the mind is peaceful and you're very present in the now. There was Ram Dass, he had this book that was famous back in the 60s, Be Here Now. Mm-hmm. To be very present, to be very attentive to the now. And that means sort of like having your mind here now, not somewhere else. Thinking about this, thinking about, I got plans to do this, where am I going to go after, this, or what do I got to do tomorrow? Like the mind is going over and, I wish I would have said that to that person, like the mind is just, but have the mind present now to what you're doing at the very moment, very conscientiously. And it could even be a very simple activity. You could just be cleaning the floor or something, but your mind could be very absorbed in it, in a meditation that I'm doing, especially in terms of bhakti yoga, and that this activity is meant to connect me with God. So it's not really so important what the activity is, it's the mind. Where's the mind at? Is the mind imbued in a mood of devotion? Did you have something you were going to say?
Oh yeah. I was just thinking how we, in the attempt to make sense of ourselves, I think that we identify with the mind and the experience of the mind. But how can we experience ourselves outside of that? Begin to experience ourselves outside of that, just that alone.
Well, one way is that, you it's sort of like, have you ever gotten stuck at these train crossings? The cars are going by, and so the mind is, sort of like a train, like these thoughts are they're just going. And you can just sort of detach by saying, I am not these thoughts, they're just like a train, just passing through. And actually most of I haven't studied this intensely, but I've heard that most of our thoughts are repetitive. It's kind of like those of you who never had record albums, you might not be able to understand this, but the old LP plastic vinyl record albums, sometimes there'd be a skip, and the needle would just go clunk, clunk, and it wouldn't move forward. It's just, so the mind, it's sort of like it gets stuck, and we tend to repeat. We have repeating patterns, but I don't know. Does anybody else have some thoughts about how we can detach from the mind?
I got an idea. I know the Christians that I wasn't raised real strict Christian or anything, but I'm very open to it. And the Christians, I listen to a radio station, it's pop, and Jesus. And they say, give it to God. Just give it to Krishna. Just my hand go crazy, just you take it and then go forward. It really works for me.
Yeah, but
Give it
one,
all.
one devotee, he said when he's chanting japa by Sheshika, what was his name? He said when thoughts come, and they may be not necessarily the most spiritually uplifting thoughts, this is just like when we have these initiation ceremonies or weddings and so on, they have a fire, and then you offer items into the fire, swaha. So he said when you're chanting japa, think of it as like a fire. And these thoughts come in, you just offer them into the fire of the holy name, swaha, because you can't fight. You can't fight the mind. And that's kind of like it's like making friends with the mind. If we stop dealing with our mind as an adversary, and say, no, my mind, my dear mind, I know you want to think about this now, or that, but let's think about Krishna. Let's think about positive. And then one thing that Prabhupada describes about the mind is that the mind should be trained to be thinking of doing good for others. That's very good training for the mind, that how can I do good for others? And that's you have something to add?
Yes, what was the question you asked?
She was asking about how do we detach from the mind, like we're not
How can we experience ourselves outside?
Outside the mind and not identify with the
Detach
mind.
yourself out of the mind as in astral projecting, or detach yourself out of your mind as in not being materialistic or
Not solely identifying with the
within
experience of our subjective experience of the mind, the memories
the
of the mind.
memories. I mean, whenever I break off of my mind, I usually strip myself away from everything and everything, which is like purification and I center myself, because if I'm stripped out of everything, then it makes my mind humble. Like, okay, I don't have this, I want it, but I don't have it. I can have it, but I choose not to have it. It's my choice. Now I'm making the choice. You have a choice to do whatever you want, whether it is to advance or not to advance. So when you're basically like out of your mind, that's when you're basically you yourself is making your own decisions. And when I strip myself out of everything, even food. It could be food. You can strip yourself away from food, which is what do they call it in English? Are you not
Fasting.
fasting? You fast. That's when you fast and you eat certain types of foods, or you eat a certain amount of food at a certain period of day. It's the part of fasting which you're making a choice of stripping yourself from that. Because you can have it, it's there, it's not bad for you, but you're doing it on your own behalf, your own choice. Now, it's not your mind thinking, because your mind is asking for food like you spoke about, you touched that subject yourself, you know? But when you tell yourself, I'm not going to do that, and you're picking the choice, that's when you're learning how to make actual choice. That's when you're making your choice that counts. Because now when you learn how to make those choices, when you proceed to other choices where you really have to think about it, is this the right decision or not? That's when it counts. Because you stripped yourself away from your food, from materialistic stuff, from even the people you say you love, the people that love you. You know, because just loving people or having people that love you, you could become codependent. Or you can become accustomed to that love, like, oh, now I feel some type of way, so I'm gonna go run to this person or to that person because I'm gonna feel that comfort. No, you're gonna strip yourself away from that, and you're gonna build yourself. You're growing spiritually.
Chandrika, did you have something?
Say that a lot of the times as humans we're conditioned to being problem orientated, so we kind of get attached, as you were saying, to the problems, and we can't find solutions, you were saying. So it seems like solutions come with spiritual growth. So as we become more attuned to Krishna consciousness, then super soul comes in and helps with the solutions, and then you get sort of like used to those solutions, and then so it pushes you away from the problems anymore, and you think, I know there's a solution because it was before, and it's like, it seems like solutions most of the time seem like a spiritual realization or experience, and then you sort of get attached to that, so therefore we're getting more attached to God consciousness, Krishna, and away from the problem thinking, which is in the lower modes.
You brought up a great point here in the 6th chapter, just the next verse after the one I read, it says,
What text are you reading?
Chapter 6, text 7 now. It says, for one who has conquered the mind, the super soul is already reached, for he has attained tranquility. To such a man, happiness and distress, heat and cold, honor and dishonor are all the same. And in the commentary, Prabhupada writes, one has to abide by superior dictation. When one's mind is fixed on the superior nature, he has no alternative but to follow the dictation of the Supreme. The mind must admit some superior dictation. This kind of, for what you're speaking about, it kind of taking control. I'm not going to be subjected to the whims of the mind. I'm above the dictate of the mind. And it says when the mind must admit some superior dictation and follow it. The effect of controlling the mind is that one automatically follows the dictation of the Paramatma, or the super soul. And then prior to having that direct sort of communion with the super soul, God in the heart, manifests externally as the spiritual master, the sadhus, and the sacred writings is, if we're not, because we may not be able to discern the voice of the super soul from the many other voices in our head. So then Krishna very mercifully appears in the form of the guru and the sadhus and the scriptures. Bhagavad Gita itself is Krishna speaking to Arjuna. So there's real Prabhupada writes, there's no difference between Krishna speaking to Arjuna 5,000 years ago and reading Bhagavad Gita today. It's the same Krishna, the same instructions, and Arjuna is actually playing the part of a conditioned soul. and asking the questions that are perplexing all of us. He's kind of playing the everyman, so to speak, and inquiring from Krishna how to navigate this complex material world. It's a very bewildering place, the material world.
Can I say something now?
Sure.
I believe.
What was your name again?
Oh, fire.
Oh Fire?
Oh, fire.
Oh Fire, okay. Fire away, Oh Fire.
I believe these sacred books have a lot of science to offer to us.
A lot of what?
Science.
Science?
Yes. In a lot of various ways. And I mean, science is like, it's like a digestion, and you're like seeing what actually works better for what results. So when you're like doing science, it's like you're constantly testing and getting results, and you're searching for the next result, which way is the best way, the best route. And all you're doing is collecting information and data. All of these sacred books, it's all that data and information that has been written for us from teachers, what has worked for them. And it's simplified in a text and offered to us to see if that worked for them, maybe it could work for us, for others.
Yeah, I like that you bring out science, because Prabhupada often said that Krishna consciousness is not, because religion conveys an idea of just, it's faith, and your faith can change. You can say, I'm a Christian, now I've switched my faith, now I'm a Hindu, now I'm a Muslim. It's science. Prabhupada, he wrote one book called The Nectar of Devotion. Is a translation from an earlier work by Rupa Goswami. And it's called The Science of Devotion. Science of Devotion. So, yeah, there are spiritual scientists, who have practiced, these teachings, and they've got results, and we can, just like if you're gonna, like in science, like you have the theoretical science class, and then you have a lab, right? So now it's, maybe the teacher is giving you a lecture. Okay, now we're gonna go into the lab, and we're gonna demonstrate what we talked about. And then you get the, the test tubes and the whatever, the Bunsen burners, and okay, now we're gonna mix something that you read about. Now we're gonna see if it actually works. So yeah, the scriptures in a sense are like that. They're scientifically presenting, okay, if you do this and you do that, you should get this result. So it's very scientific. You can experiment. We don't say, just don't blindly accept these things. It's not just blind faith. Make the experiment. The laboratory is your own heart. Are you experiencing what is being described in these sacred writings that has been documented by very, very advanced spiritual personalities? So the research work, in a sense, has already been done. Now it's just us to perform the experiment on our own heart. And it's nothing that we should blindly accept. You should make your own experiment in your own life. And you read Bhagavad Gita, chant Hare Krishna, practice devotional service. See what happens. See what happens in your own heart. And the bottom line is, are you happy? Why do we do anything?
Satisfaction.
Yeah, we want some happiness, right? It's like, I'm gonna go to the drugstore. Yeah, will you give me a bottle of pneumonia, please? No, you go to get, relieved. I'll say, we want to be healthy. We want to be happy. So that's the bottom line. Does it work? Are you happy? And one time Prabhupada was being interviewed on a television station, and the interviewer, you can see this, it's actually available in video, and they asked him, so how do you know if somebody's achieving success, in your practice of spiritual life, Krishna consciousness? And Prabhupada said, that's very easy. He'll be very jolly. So this joyfulness, ananda, satchit ananda, to be full of knowledge, to feel your deathlessness. Nobody wants to die. Everybody's trying to avoid death because by nature we're eternal. We're full of knowledge and we're full of bliss. We're full of happiness, and the ultimate happiness is that full communion with God, connection with God through love. That's the ultimate happiness. And as Prabhupada said, the proof of the pudding is in the tasting. We're not saying that you should just accept blindly. You should experience for yourself. And when you do experience, there's nothing that compares. The happiness that, not just in Krishna consciousness, any bona fide spiritual path, whether any legitimate spiritual practice, you will experience a joy that's not dependent on some external circumstance. It's internal.
I just want to add really quick in that aspect of an experiment. So I have been in this path of teaching and learning for a decade now, and I've read 4 different Gitas, Bhagavad-Gitas, and this is the first time that I feel clarity because I'm coming here and I'm chanting, and it's such a different experience in my heart.
It's a testimonial.
Yeah.
And what was your name?
Karen Tatiana.
That's a tough one.
Slow.
Karen
Karen?
Tatiana.
Yeah.
Tatiana.
So it's Karen. Karen or Karen?
It's Karen.
Karen.
Yes. I'm from Colombia.
Okay.
Oh.
Okay.
But you can call me Tatiana.
Yeah, well, Prabhupada in the introduction or the preface, he said, why another Bhagavad Gita? There's so many Bhagavad Gitas.
Mhm.
And he said, because, and he coined his Bhagavad Gita as it is, because Prabhupada said that so many Bhagavad Gitas, but no one, from these other Bhagavad Gitas, no one was really taking up the practice of bhakti. It was like, oh, it's very interesting, but because Prabhupada was a devotee of Krishna, we say a pure devotee of Krishna, there was a potency, there's an efficacy, there's a heart connection that you feel when you hear from a pure devotee of Krishna. It sort of activates the knowledge. It's beyond just the intellect. You get an emotional experience. You actually feel something very substantial, and that actually there was one conversation Prabhupada was asking a group of people, why do we accept that Krishna is God? And there were different devotees who were offering different explanations, well, because the Bhagavad Gita says, and a number of different things, and Prabhupada was like, no. And then one devotee said, because we feel it. And Prabhupada said, yes. It's a feeling. You feel it in your heart, like something is resonating on a deep level beyond just the intellect. You actually experience
The personality?
Yeah.
Personality?
Yeah,
Personality?
the personality of God, we say, and that we do need that kind of experience to move us forward. There has to be some. It's a reciprocation. Where we need this rasa we talked about at the very beginning. Rasa. We're all looking for a taste of love. And there's many varieties of love. There's, love between friends, between a parent and a child, or intimacy. They're all different flavors of love, and they're called rasas. And it has its origin in God. There are many different mellows or rasas. So this bhakti rasa, it's very, very, very sweet. And it's, there's Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he says there's this rasa that we get from chanting the holy name. It's an ever increasing ocean of bliss, and it gives us how does he put it, the taste that we've all been looking for. He said Lord, the Sri Krishna Sankirtan, which cleanses the heart of all the dust accumulated for years together and extinguishes the blazing fire of conditional life,
Hare Krishna.
repeated birth and death. The Sankirtan movement is the prime benediction for humanity at large because it spreads the rays of the benediction moon. It's the life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases the ocean of transcendental bliss and enables us to fully taste the nectar for which we're always anxious. So, on that note, let's enjoy our dinner and meet some new friends or keep your old friends nourished. There's an expression, if you want grass to grow, you have to water it. So if you have a relationship, you have to nourish it, you have to water it. So either water the grass or plant some new grass, either way. Thank you very much.
There's another word, morning, like good morning, but there's M-O-U-R-N-I-N-G. So mourning is associated with mourning, like grief in our language also. Our subconscious could process that like that.
Before we get too engaged in conversation, I'm wondering if anybody can give me a ride home downtown after dinner. Going in that direction.
I'm headed downtown if you need a ride.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I live downtown. That'd be great.